My name is Sophia, and the moment I discovered my fiance in bed with my maid of honor the night before our wedding became the turning point of my life. I stood in that hotel doorway at 2 a.m., still wearing the dress from my rehearsal dinner, holding a bottle of champagne I'd brought to surprise him. The bottle slipped from my hands and shattered on the marble floor, but neither of them noticed at first. They were too busy destroying everything I'd built my future on. Have you ever felt your entire world collapse in the space of a single breath? Let me back up. 6 months earlier, I was the kind of woman people called lucky. I had a career I'd worked 12 years to build. Senior architect at Morrison and Associates, the most prestigious firm in the city. I just won a bidding war to design the new downtown cultural center, a project that would define my career. And I was engaged to David Hartley, the man I'd loved since college, the man who'd proposed on a beach in Santorini with my grandmother's ring. David came from old money, the kind of family whose name was on hospital wings and university buildings. His parents had never quite approved of me. I was the daughter of a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs to put me through state school. I didn't summer in the Hamptons or winter in Aspen, but David always said he loved that about me. My drive, my independence, my refusal to be impressed by his last name. My best friend Rachel had been there through it all. We'd met freshman year of college, bonded over terrible cafeteria food and late-night study sessions. She'd held my hand through my mother's cancer scare, celebrated every promotion, helped me pick out my wedding dress. When David proposed, there was never a question of who would be my maid of honor. The wedding was planned for June at the Hartley family estate, 300 guests, ice sculptures, a 12-piece orchestra. David's mother had insisted on handling the arrangements, and I'd let her, grateful for one less thing to manage while juggling the cultural center project. I should have seen it as the warning sign it was. She was creating the wedding she wanted, not the one I did. The rehearsal dinner was held at the Grand Hotel downtown, where the wedding party was staying. It was a beautiful evening, champagne toasts, laughter, my mother crying happy tears. David's father gave a speech about how their family was gaining not just a daughter-in-law, but a woman of substance and character. I remember catching Rachel's eye across the table and her giving me a thumbs up. Around midnight, everyone started heading to their rooms. David kissed me goodnight at the elevator, said he was going to grab a drink with his groomsmen. One last night of freedom, he joked, and I'd laughed, told him not to stay up too late. We had a wedding in 16 hours. I went to my suite, tried to sleep, couldn't. The adrenaline of the day, the anticipation of tomorrow. My mind was racing. Around 1:30 a.m., I decided to surprise David. I grabbed the bottle of Dom Perignon my team had given me as a wedding gift and headed to his room on the floor above. I had a key. He'd given it to me weeks ago, said he wanted me to have access to everything that was his. The irony wasn't lost on me later. I knocked first, quietly, not wanting to wake anyone else on the floor. No answer. I figured he might be in the shower or already asleep. I used the key, pushed open the door, and that's when I heard it. Laughter. Her laughter. Rachel's laughter. I walked down the short hallway to the bedroom area, each step feeling like I was walking through water. Part of me already knew what I would find, but the human brain is a stubborn thing. It clings to hope even when hope is a lie. They were in bed, naked, wine glasses on the nightstand, clothes scattered across the floor, including the bridesmaid dress I'd paid for, the one Rachel was supposed to wear tomorrow while standing beside me at the altar. I must have made a sound because that's when they finally noticed me. David sat up, his face going white. Rachel grabbed the sheet, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear, but not quite like remorse. "Sophia," David started. I held up my hand. I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. I needed to understand first. "How long?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, calm, almost clinical. David opened his mouth, closed it. Rachel was crying now, but I couldn't look at her. If I looked at her, I might break, and I couldn't afford to break. Not yet. "How long?" I repeated. 2 years, David finally whispered. 2 years. I did the math in my head. 2 years meant it started before he proposed. before Santorini, before my grandmother's ring. Every memory I had was suddenly suspect, every moment potentially a lie. The apartment viewings, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. When you said you were working late, the weekend you went to your parents' place alone because I had the flu. David couldn't meet my eyes. Rachel was still crying, and I realized with a cold clarity that she was crying for herself, not for me. I set the champagne bottle down on the dresser, gently, carefully, even though what I wanted was to throw it against the wall. Then I took off my grandmother's ring and placed it beside the bottle. "The wedding is off," I said. "I'll inform the guests in the morning. You can tell your parents whatever story you want. I honestly don't care anymore." "Sophia, please." David reached for me and I stepped back so fast I nearly tripped. Don't. Don't touch me, don't call me, don't ever speak to me again." I walked out of that room with my head high and my heart in pieces. I made it back to my own suite, locked the door, and then I collapsed. I spent the rest of the night on my bathroom floor crying so hard I thought I might actually die from it. Part of me wanted to. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you something solid to push against. By the time the sun came up, I'd stopped crying. I'd washed my face, fixed my hair, and put on the armor I'd learned to wear growing up without money in a world that valued it above everything. I called my mother first, then my assistant. By 8 a.m., every guest had been contacted. The wedding was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. The vendors were informed. The gifts would be returned. David called 17 times that morning. I blocked his number. Rachel sent a 6-page text message explaining how it just happened, how they never meant to hurt me, how they were truly in love. I deleted it without reading past the first paragraph. David's mother showed up at my suite at noon, furious about the embarrassment to their family, threatening to sue me for the cost of the wedding. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized that I'd been so busy trying to earn her approval that I'd never noticed she wasn't worth having it. "Send me the bill," I said. "I'll pay every penny. It's worth it to never see your family again." She left, sputtering about ingratitude and common behavior. I laughed after she was gone, a slightly hysterical sound that scared me a little. By Monday morning, I was back at work. People whispered, gave me pitying looks, but I ignored them. I had the Cultural Center project, and I threw myself into it with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy, but kept me from falling apart. The firm's partners called me in 2 weeks later. There was a problem. The Hartley Foundation was a major donor to the Cultural Center project. David's father was on the board. They were threatening to pull their funding unless I was removed from the project. I sat in that conference room and felt the rage I'd been containing since that hotel room night finally break free. This was my project. I'd won it on merit. I'd spent 6 months on the design, and they were going to take it from me because I'd had the audacity to not marry a cheater. "No," I said. The senior partner, Morrison himself, looked uncomfortable. "Sophia, you have to understand the position this puts the firm in. I understand perfectly. You're choosing money over justice. You're punishing me for being betrayed. And you're setting a precedent that any man with a checkbook can control a woman's career. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple, and I'm not leaving this project. If you want to fire me, but I'm not going quietly." They didn't fire me. Not then. Instead, they suggested I take some time, focus on healing, step back temporarily. All the polite euphemisms for surrender. I went back to my office, closed the door, and made a decision. If they wanted to play games with my career, I would play a game they'd never forget. I worked late that night, and the next, and the next. I compiled every email, every document, every piece of communication related to the Cultural Center project. I documented every decision, every design choice, every innovation that made my proposal the winning bid. And then I documented something else: the Hartley Foundation's involvement, David's father's influence, and the inappropriate pressure being placed on the firm. The city council was the one awarding the contract, not the Hartley Foundation. The foundation was just a donor, one of many. They had no legal authority to demand my removal, but they were counting on the firm being too afraid to fight back. I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd already lost everything that mattered. I requested a meeting with the City Council's Development Committee. Morrison tried to stop me, but I went over his head. I presented my case calmly, professionally, with all the documentation to back it up. I explained the situation, not as a betrayed woman seeking revenge, but as an architect fighting for the integrity of the bidding process. The committee was furious. The suggestion that a donor could control personnel decisions on a city project was enough to threaten the entire deal. They launched an investigation. The Hartley Foundation, suddenly facing public scrutiny and questions about corruption, quietly backed down. David's father issued a statement about respecting the city's process. I got to keep my project, but the cost was high. Morrison never forgave me for going around him. The partnership I'd been working toward for years evaporated. Other clients, nervous about the controversy, started requesting different architects. 6 months later, I left the firm. It was technically my choice, but we all knew the truth. I'd won the battle and lost the war. Or so I thought. I took the severance package and used it to start my own firm. It was terrifying. I had no clients, no reputation beyond the controversy, no safety net. But I had the Cultural Center project, and I poured everything into it. I worked 18-hour days, spent weekends on site, obsessed over every detail until it was perfect. The Cultural Center opened 14 months after the wedding that never was. The mayor cut the ribbon. Architecture magazines called it revolutionary. The design won 3 national awards, and my firm got 6 new client requests in the first week after opening. I was building something real, something mine, something no one could take away from me. But I still thought about David. I thought about Rachel. I thought about that hotel room and the look on their faces when I walked in. And I thought about the fact that they'd suffered no real consequences. David's family was still wealthy and influential. Rachel had moved to California, was working in tech, posting pictures on social media of her perfect new life. They'd moved on like I was just a minor inconvenience, a small detour on their way to happiness. That's when I got the call from David's cousin, Amanda. We'd always gotten along. She was the one member of his family who'd seemed genuinely kind. She wanted to meet for coffee, said she had something to tell me. We met at a small cafe far from our usual haunts. Amanda looked nervous, kept stirring her coffee without drinking it. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she said, "but you deserve to know. David and Rachel are getting married." I absorbed this like a punch to the stomach. "When?" "Next month in Bali. It's going to be this big destination wedding. The family's going, all their friends. And they've been telling everyone this story about how they fell in love after your wedding was canceled, how it was fate, how sometimes things fall apart so better things can come together." I felt that rage again, cold and clean. They were rewriting history, making themselves the heroes of a love story instead of the villains of a betrayal. "There's more," Amanda said quietly. "David's father is making him sign a prenup. Apparently, the family's concerned about gold diggers now." She laughed bitterly. "The irony being that Rachel has less money than you did, but she's better at playing the game. She's taken etiquette classes, learned about wine, can talk about art and charity galas. She's become what his mother always wanted." I thanked Amanda for telling me, went home, and sat in my apartment staring at the wall. Part of me wanted to let it go. I had my career back. I was successful. Wasn't that enough? But it wasn't about me anymore. It was about justice. It was about truth. I started digging. I hired a private investigator, expensive but worth it. I wanted to know everything about David and Rachel's relationship, when it really started, how they'd hidden it, whether there were others. What the investigator found was worse than I'd imagined. The affair had started 3 years ago, not 2. David had lied about even that timeline. There were emails, texts, hotel receipts, and there were others. At least two other women David had been involved with during our engagement. Rachel knew about one of them. She'd helped him cover it up. The investigator also found something interesting about Rachel's new life in California. The tech job wasn't quite what she'd portrayed on social media. She'd been fired from her previous position for ethics violations, something about insider trading using information from a friend's company. The new job was lower level, less prestigious, but she was good at making it look glamorous online. I took all this information and I thought about what to do with it. I could release it publicly, destroy them both. But that felt too easy, too crude. I wanted something more elegant, something that would make them feel what I felt: the betrayal, the humiliation, the sudden realization that everything they thought was solid was actually built on lies. That's when I had an idea. It was petty, maybe, possibly even cruel, but it was also perfectly legal and devastatingly effective. I contacted a friend who worked in publishing. I told her I wanted to write a book, a memoir about betrayal, resilience, and rebuilding after everything falls apart. She was immediately interested. Stories about overcoming adversity sold well, and I had the added benefit of being a successful architect with a compelling narrative. I wrote the book in 3 months. I didn't use their real names, changed identifying details enough to avoid a lawsuit, but anyone who knew us would recognize the story. I wrote about the engagement, the affair, the night before the wedding. I wrote about the professional sabotage, the way David's family tried to destroy my career. And I wrote about rebuilding, about discovering my own strength, about learning that the worst thing that ever happened to me was also the best thing, because it freed me from a life that would have slowly killed who I really was. The book was published 6 weeks before David and Rachel's wedding. It became a bestseller overnight. Women everywhere connected with the story. It was featured on morning shows, book clubs, podcasts. The themes were universal: betrayal, resilience, justice. But the details were specific enough that everyone in our social circle knew exactly who I was writing about. David's family was furious. They threatened to sue for defamation, but their lawyers advised against it. Everything in the book was true, and a lawsuit would only draw more attention to it. Rachel's family was humiliated. Her father, a prominent physician, suddenly had patients asking him about his daughter's behavior. The media attention was intense. I gave careful interviews, always polite, always focused on the broader themes of the book rather than the specific people. I never said their names publicly. I didn't have to. The internet did that work for me. But I still had one more move to make. 2 weeks before the Bali wedding, I took a honeymoon, by myself, to Santorini, the place where David had proposed, where this whole nightmare had started. I stayed in a beautiful villa overlooking the caldera, drank wine at sunset, went sailing, visited ancient ruins, and I took pictures. Beautiful, happy pictures of a woman who'd found peace and joy on her own terms. On the day of David and Rachel's wedding, I posted those pictures on social media with a simple caption: "Here's to second chances, new beginnings, and choosing yourself. Santorini is even more beautiful when you're not sharing it with the wrong person." Self-love journey, Jock moving forward. It wasn't explicitly about their wedding, but everyone knew. The post went viral. Thousands of comments from people celebrating my resilience, my grace, my refusal to let betrayal define me. And then I did something that, looking back, might have been a step too far, but in the moment felt exactly right. I had a gift delivered to their wedding venue in Bali. It was wrapped beautifully, looked expensive. Inside was a copy of my book, with a note that read, "Congratulations on your special day. May your marriage be built on a stronger foundation than the lies you built your relationship on. Wishing you all the honesty and loyalty you showed me. With warmth, Sophia." I learned later that Rachel opened it in front of several guests during the gift opening reception. She turned white, dropped the book like it was on fire. David apparently tried to laugh it off, but the damage was done. Everyone at that wedding knew their story now. knew they were celebrating a relationship that began with betrayal, knew that the bride and groom were exactly the kind of people who would cheat on someone the night before their wedding. The wedding photos they posted on social media were beautiful, but the comment section was brutal. People who'd read my book, strangers and acquaintances alike, leaving messages about karma and consequences. They ended up deleting the posts entirely within a week. Amanda called me after the wedding. She was laughing so hard she could barely speak. "You are absolutely diabolical," she said. "Half the family wants to disown David, the other half is pretending nothing happened." And Rachel's mother cried through the entire ceremony. Not happy tears, mortified tears. It was the most uncomfortable wedding I've ever attended, and I loved every second of it. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite satisfaction. It was too complicated for that. But closure, maybe. The knowledge that they would never be able to tell their story without remembering mine. That their beginning would always be tainted by how it actually started. That was 4 years ago. My firm now has 23 employees. We've designed 4 major buildings, won dozens of awards. I've written 2 more books, one about architecture and design, one about leadership and resilience. I speak at conferences, mentor young architects, particularly women who face discrimination or setbacks in their careers. I never married. I dated for a while, even fell in love once with a divorced professor who taught philosophy and made me laugh. It didn't work out. We wanted different things. But it was healthy and honest and reminded me what a relationship should feel like. I'm happy. Genuinely, actually happy in a way I never was with David. I realize now that I was so focused on building the life I thought I was supposed to want that I never stopped to consider whether it was the life I actually wanted. I heard through the grapevine that David and Rachel divorced 2 years after their wedding. Apparently, he cheated on her with someone from his office. The symmetry was almost poetic. She tried to reach out to me afterward, sent an email asking if we could talk, saying she understood now what I must have felt. I didn't respond. Some people deserve forgiveness, but not everyone deserves your time. David sent me a LinkedIn message last year. Just one line. "I'm sorry. You deserved better." I deleted it without responding. Because here's what I've learned. Revenge isn't about making someone else hurt as much as you did. That's just spreading pain around and calling it justice. Real revenge is building a life so good, so full, so completely yours, that the person who betrayed you becomes irrelevant. It's succeeding in spite of them, not because of them. But I'd be lying if I said sending that book to their wedding didn't feel absolutely perfect. Sometimes the best revenge is success, and sometimes the best revenge is making sure everyone knows the truth about who they really are. I'm not ashamed of that. I fought back the only way I knew how, with honesty, with strength, and with the refusal to let their lies become the final word on my story. My mother asked me once if I regretted it, the book, the gift, the very public nature of how I reclaim my narrative. I thought about it for a long time before answering. "No," I finally said, because it wasn't just about them. It was about every woman who's ever been betrayed and told to be quiet about it. Every person who's lost something they worked for because someone more powerful decided they didn't deserve it. It was about refusing to disappear, just because that would be more convenient for everyone else. She hugged me then, and I realized that I'd become exactly the kind of woman she'd always hoped I would be. Not perfect, not always polite, but strong and honest, and unwilling to accept less than I deserved. The cultural center I designed hosts free community events every month, art classes for underprivileged kids, music performances, theater productions. I go sometimes, stand in the space I created, and watch people experiencing beauty and connection. That building will outlive me, will outlive all of us. Long after everyone's forgotten about the scandal and the betrayal and the revenge, that building will still be standing, still serving its purpose. That's the real victory. Not what I took from them, but what I built for myself and for others. I still have hard days, anniversaries of significant moments, reminders that pop up unexpectedly. Last month, I found the dress I'd worn to the rehearsal dinner shoved in the back of my closet. For a moment, I was back in that hotel hallway, holding champagne and believing in a future that was already dead. But then I looked around my office, at the awards on the wall, the photos of projects I'm proud of, the message board covered with thank you notes from clients and employees and mentees. I looked at the life I'd built from the rubble of my worst day, and I realized something important. They didn't destroy me that night, they freed me. Sometimes the worst betrayal is the best gift you'll ever receive because it forces you to become who you were always meant to be. I'm Sophia. I'm an architect, an author, a businesswoman, and a survivor. I'm the woman who caught her fiance cheating the night before her wedding and decided that wouldn't be the end of my story. It would be the beginning of a better one. And if that makes me petty or vindictive or unforgiving, I can live with that because I can also live with myself. In the end, that's the only revenge that really matters. Becoming someone you're proud to be, no matter who tried to break you along the way.